When four white high school bullies corner a 6-year-old black boy in an empty school hallway, they don't just tease him. They lead him to the roof and kick him off. They laugh while he falls. They think he's nobody. But when the little boy survives and whispers his father's name in the hospital, everything changes. Because his dad isn't just some parent, they just assaulted the child of a high-ranking CIA officer. And what happens next? It's not revenge. It's something far worse. As the boys scramble to cover their tracks, the mother fights through threats, humiliation, and a school that blames her, just to protect her son. But when a terrified witness finally comes forward with the truth, the whole community is forced to answer for what it allowed to happen. And in the end, the most powerful thing isn't the father's rank. It's the courage of a broken little boy learning how to stand again. The late afternoon sun slanted through Jefferson Ridge High's windows, casting long shadows in the empty hallway. Denise Carter gripped her 6-year-old son's hand tightly as they hurried through the main entrance. Her phone still showed the daycare's message. Emergency closure, burst pipe. "I'm so sorry, baby," Denise said, leading Elijah toward the front office. "Mama's got to cover Mrs. Peterson's shift, but it won't be long." Elijah clutched his worn sketchbook to his chest, his NASA patch catching the light on his blue hoodie. His sneakers squeaked against the freshly waxed floor as they walked. "Can I draw my planes?" he asked quietly. "Of course, sweetie." Denise settled him into one of the hard plastic chairs by the office. "Stay right here, okay? I'll be back to check on you real soon." She dug in her purse and pulled out his favorite colored pencils. Elijah's small face lit up as he took them, already flipping to a clean page. "Remember, don't go wandering," Denise said, smoothing his hair. "If you need anything, Ms. Rita's right inside the office." Elijah nodded, already lost in his drawing. Denise watched him for a moment, her heart aching. He looked so small in that big chair, but she had no choice. Bills needed paying, and single mums couldn't afford to miss shifts. "Lord, keep him safe," she whispered, then hurried down the hall toward the cafeteria. For 20 minutes Elijah sat contentedly drawing, his legs swinging beneath the chair. But then nature called. He looked toward the office, but Ms. Rita was on the phone, her back turned. He knew where the nearest bathroom was, just around the corner. He'd be quick. Clutching his sketchbook, Elijah padded down the hall. But when he reached the bathroom, an out-of-order sign blocked the door. He bit his lip, looking further down the corridor. There had to be another one. The renovation wing stretched before him, afternoon light streaming through plastic sheeting. Elijah took a few hesitant steps forward, his sneakers echoing in the empty space. That's when he heard them. Voices and laughter bouncing off the walls. 4 teenagers rounded the corner, stopping short when they spotted him. "Well, well," said the tallest boy, his Letterman jacket marking him as Brock Whitman, senior class president and star quarterback. "What do we have here?" A girl with sleek blonde hair, Kayla Harlan, pulled out her phone, already recording. The other 2 boys, Jason and Mike, flanked Brock like shadows. "Who let you in here, little man?" Brock's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't some daycare center." Elijah hugged his sketchbook tighter. "My mama works here. I'm supposed to stay by the office." "Oh, your mama works here?" Kayla's voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Cleaning lady, right?" "Actually, she's the—" "Doesn't matter," Brock cut in, stepping closer. "You don't belong here. But hey, since you're so brave, coming into our school, want to play a game?" Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Brock, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Brock snapped. He turned back to Elijah with that cold smile. "Come on, kid. Show us how brave you are. We've got a special dare for you." Before Elijah could run, they surrounded him. Gentle pushes and pulls guided him toward an unlocked door marked Roof Access, Authorized Personnel Only. "Just a quick trip up and down," Brock said as they climbed the stairs. "Unless you're scared." Elijah's legs trembled. He wanted to cry out for his mama, but fear locked his voice away. The metal steps clanged under their feet as they climbed higher and higher. Finally, they emerged onto the roof. The wind whipped at Elijah's hoodie, and he clutched his sketchbook like a shield. The edge of the building loomed too close. "Please," he whispered. "I want to go back." "Oh, look who's crying," Kayla laughed, phone still recording. "Baby wants his mama." "Just a peek over the edge," Brock insisted, moving behind Elijah. "Don't be such a—" The shove came hard and fast. Elijah stumbled forward, his feet scraping the roof's edge. For one horrible moment he teetered there, then another kick knocked his feet from under him. The world tilted, his sketchbook flew from his hands, wind rushed past his ears as he fell, a scream finally tearing from his throat. Denise was walking back to check on Elijah when she heard the commotion, running footsteps, shouts, then a terrible sound that stopped her heart, her baby's scream. Cut suddenly short, she ran. Down the hall through the renovation wing, bursting out a side door just in time to see her son's small body hitting an awning before tumbling onto a pile of drama club props below. Her scream shattered the air as she ran toward him. Behind her, heavy footsteps pounded. Tom Gallagher, the retired Marine who worked security, racing to help. In the distance, a siren began to wail. The fluorescent lights of Virginia Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across the pediatric trauma bay. Denise Carter's fingers twisted the fabric of Elijah's small space-themed hoodie, her knuckles white with tension. The cotton was still warm from his body, but her son lay motionless on the hospital bed, surrounded by a flutter of medical staff. "Lord, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the steady beep of monitors. "Please keep my baby safe." Tom Gallagher, still in his school security uniform, stood beside her like an old oak tree, weathered but unshakable. His presence anchored her as the trauma team worked. The awning caught his fall first, the doctor explained, checking Elijah's pupils with a penlight. Then he landed on those theater cushions and prop mattresses. If they hadn't been there... He didn't finish the sentence. "He's got a concussion, some bruising, and we're checking for internal injuries," a nurse added gently. "But his vital signs are stable." Tom kept one hand on Denise's shoulder while speaking quietly into his phone, updating the police. "Yes, sir. The boy's condition is stable. Security footage should show..." He glanced at Denise. "We'll need that footage secured." Down the hallway, pressed against the wall like guilty shadows, stood 4 teenagers. Brock Whitman's usual swagger had vanished. Kayla Harlan kept checking her phone, deleting videos with trembling fingers. The other 2 boys shifted from foot to foot, unable to look at each other. "Just stick to the story," Brock whispered. "It was an accident. He was playing where he shouldn't have been." A nurse approached Denise with a clipboard. "Mom, we need the father's information for our records." Denise blinked back tears and took the form. Her handwriting wobbled as she filled in Daniel Carter and a phone number. Kayla's eyes widened as she caught sight of the name. She tugged at Brock's sleeve, her face pale. "Carter, my stepdad was talking about someone named Carter at dinner last week. He's like really high up in intelligence at Langley." "What do you mean intelligence?" Brock's voice cracked. "CIA," Kayla hissed. "Like serious CIA." The word rippled through their group like an electric shock. The 2 other boys took several steps backward, as if trying to disappear into the wall. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. A man stepped out, average height, unremarkable dark suit, tired eyes that missed nothing. Daniel Carter moved with quiet purpose, his footsteps silent on the linoleum floor. "Where is my son?" His voice was low and controlled, but it carried down the hallway. Denise turned toward him, still clutching Elijah's hoodie. "Daniel." The teenagers watched him approach, their faces draining of color. This wasn't the dramatic entrance they'd feared. No tactical team, no weapons, no threats. Somehow his calm was worse. This was a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be dangerous. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," a new voice cut through the tension. Principal Regina Walsh strode toward them, her heels clicking against the floor, her smile professional and practiced. "I came as soon as I heard such an unfortunate accident." Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Accident?" "Yes, well," Principal Walsh lowered her voice, "children will explore where they shouldn't. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. Find a quiet way to handle this unfortunate incident." Tom Gallagher's weathered face darkened. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a small sound came from the hospital bed, Elijah whimpering in his sleep. Denise rushed to her son's side, Daniel right behind her. The principal's suggestion hung in the air like smoke, poisoning the sterile hospital atmosphere with the first hint of a cover-up. The first grey light of Tuesday morning filtered through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes across the ICU floor. Machines beeped steadily, marking each precious beat of Elijah's heart. Daniel Carter sat hunched in a chair meant for someone half his size, his tired eyes fixed on the gentle rise and fall of his son's small chest beneath the white blanket. Elijah looked so fragile against the stark hospital sheets, his brown skin ashen under the harsh fluorescent lights. His favorite space patch hoodie hung on a hook nearby, still dusty from the fall. Denise appeared in the doorway, 2 paper cups of coffee warming her hands. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually neat work uniform was wrinkled from a night spent in waiting room chairs. She handed 1 cup to Daniel, but neither of them drank. "Any change?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Stable. That's what matters right now." A nurse with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair entered to check Elijah's vitals. "When he wakes up, he might be confused," she explained softly. "Maybe scared. That's normal after what he's been through. Just keep talking to him. Let him know. He's safe." Out in the hallway, a detective in a rumpled blazer waited to take Denise's statement. His notepad was already half full of neat lines. "Mrs. Carter, can you tell me why Elijah was at Jefferson Ridge yesterday afternoon?" Denise straightened her shoulders. "My daycare had an emergency closure, no warning. I'm the cafeteria manager. We were short-staffed for afternoon cleanup. I had no choice but to bring him." Her voice was steady, refusing to bend under the weight of implied blame. "He was supposed to stay by the office. He's a good boy. He listens." Tom Gallagher stepped forward, his security guard uniform as crisp as his military bearing. "I saw those kids with him," he said. 4 of them, all older students. They were leading him toward the stairwell like it was some kind of game. Nothing about it felt right. The detective nodded. "We'll need to review the security footage." "I'll help with that," Tom offered. "I know where every camera is placed, and I remember their faces." Daniel excused himself to speak with Elijah's doctor in the conference room. He sat with perfect posture, asking detailed questions about recovery time, physical therapy, potential complications. Not once did he mention his CIA position or pull rank. "This isn't about who I am," he said firmly. "This is about my son's safety. Nothing else matters." Around midday, Jefferson Ridge's principal, Dr. Maxwell, appeared in her designer suit and pearls. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, could we speak privately?" Her smile was practiced, her tone carefully measured. "There are certain reputations to consider. The school board is very concerned about how this situation might be perceived." Daniel's face hardened. "Reputations," he repeated quietly. "My 6-year-old son is in intensive care." "Which is terrible, of course," Dr. Maxwell said quickly. "But perhaps we could handle this internally. Find a solution that protects everyone's interests?" Denise watched her husband's expression, seeing the moment he made his choice. "No," Daniel said simply. "No private deals. No quiet arrangements. My son deserves the truth. And so does every other child in your school." Dr. Maxwell's smile tightened. "I really must insist. We're done." Here, Daniel stood, his calm voice carrying steel beneath its surface. As the principal left, Denise sank into a chair, realization dawning cold and clear. The school would protect itself first. Its image, its wealthy students, its careful facade. Her son's justice would come second, if at all. She looked at Daniel, who hadn't moved. "They're going to fight us on this, aren't they?" "Yes," he answered. "But we're going to fight back. The right way." Through the ICU window, Elijah slept on, unaware of the battles being drawn around his bed. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the stripes across the floor, but couldn't quite reach the shadows gathering in the corners. The kitchen in the Whitman house gleamed with wealth. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a massive island where 4 phones now sat in a neat row. Afternoon sun streamed through designer windows, but the atmosphere felt cold. "This ends here," Mr. Whitman announced, his suit jacket still on from work. He stood with his hands planted on the counter, looking at each teen in turn. "No social media, no texts, nothing about yesterday exists anymore." Mrs. Whitman touched Kayla's shoulder. "Sweetheart, please delete everything for everyone's safety." Kayla's fingers shook as she tapped through her photo gallery. "But what if people already saw it?" "They didn't," Mr. Whitman cut in. "And they won't. I've already spoken to the school board president. This was a simple accident. Nothing more." Brock lounged against the refrigerator, arms crossed. "Dad's right. The kid shouldn't have been there anyway." Mason Price stood apart from the others, his stomach churning. He could still hear Elijah's scared voice, still see those small hands reaching out as he fell. The memory made him want to throw up. "Mason?" Mrs. Whitman's voice was honey-sweet. "Your phone too, dear." Before handing it over, Mason's trembling fingers moved quickly. He forwarded a short video clip to his private cloud storage and texted himself the login information. His heart pounded so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "The tech department confirmed the roof camera has been having issues," Mr. Whitman continued, collecting the phones. "Maintenance problems happen all the time in old buildings." Mason watched Brock smirk. That same smirk he'd worn on the roof. "What about the CIA guy?" Kayla whispered. "That family will be handled," Mr. Whitman said firmly. "They won't want attention any more than we do. Trust me, I know how to manage these situations." The teens were dismissed, but Mason barely made it to the bathroom before getting sick. He splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. The boy in the mirror looked scared and small, just like Elijah had. Later, behind the school gym where the track team practiced, Brock cornered Mason. The brick wall felt rough against Mason's back as Brock leaned in close. "We stick together," Brock growled. "That little nothing doesn't matter, got it?" Mason nodded, his throat tight. A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. "Don't be such a baby," Brock sneered. "Nobody got hurt that bad, he's fine." But Mason had seen the hospital, had watched them load that tiny body into an ambulance. Nothing about this was fine. That night, alone in his bedroom, Mason sat cross-legged on his bed. His new phone, a replacement his parents had rushed to get, glowed in the darkness. With shaking fingers, he opened the cloud storage and played the saved clip. The video was short but clear. Elijah backing away, Brock advancing, the push, the fall. "I'm sorry," Mason whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." He lay down but didn't close his eyes. He couldn't. Every time he tried, he saw Elijah falling. Fear and shame kept sleep far away, and Mason knew with crushing certainty that peaceful nights were over until he made this right. The phone felt heavy in his hands, heavy with truth, with choices, with the weight of doing nothing while a little boy fell. Mason curled into a ball, clutching the device that held proof of their cruelty, and waited for morning. The morning sun slanted through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes across Elijah's bed. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. When voices drifted in from the hallway, he tried to disappear under his blanket, small fingers clutching the white cotton. "It's okay, sweetheart," Denise whispered, touching his hand gently. "You're safe?" A woman in soft purple scrubs entered with a gentle smile. "Hi, I'm Dr. Sarah. I help kids feel better when they're scared." She pulled up a chair, keeping her movements slow and careful. "Want to play a game with me, Elijah?" Elijah peeked out from under the blanket, not speaking but watching. "Let's count colors together," Dr. Sarah suggested. "I see something blue, your mum's sweater. Can you find something blue too?" After a long pause, Elijah pointed to the sky outside his window. "Good job. Now something red?" They continued this way, Dr. Sarah teaching Denise with subtle nods how to keep Elijah grounded without pushing too hard. When he grew tired, he reached for his sketchbook, the one thing he'd asked for repeatedly since waking. Denise's heart sank as she watched him draw. Instead of his usual airplanes soaring through cloudy skies, he made heavy black strokes, forming a dark rectangle, unmistakably a rooftop against empty white paper. Later that morning, Denise drove to Jefferson Ridge High School. Her hands shook slightly as she parked in her usual spot, but she held her head high, walking to the main office. She needed that paycheck. Hospital bills were already piling up. The HR director, Mrs. Peterson, met her with a carefully blank expression. "Please, have a seat." Denise's stomach tightened as Mrs. Peterson slid a paper across the desk. "Due to policy regarding the recent incident, we're placing you on temporary administrative leave." "Incident?" Denise's voice cracked. "You mean when my son was pushed off a roof?" Mrs. Peterson's lips thinned. "The situation is under investigation. We need to follow proper protocols. Protocols that blame the victim's mother?" The words tasted bitter. "No one is blaming anyone," Mrs. Peterson said, smoothly. "This is standard procedure." But Denise heard the undertone clearly. "You shouldn't have brought him here." Walking back to her car, she heard someone mutter, "Should have known better." She couldn't see who said it, but the words hit like a physical blow. Her eyes burned with unshed tears as she fumbled with her keys. A familiar truck pulled up beside her. Tom Gallagher's old Ford. "Need a ride?" he asked quietly. Denise nodded, grateful. She wouldn't have to drive through blur of tears. Instead of heading straight home, Tom turned down a tree-lined street and pulled up to a small brick church. "Some folks here want to help," he explained. Inside the bright church basement, a group of older women were setting up for what looked like a meal prep session. A silver-haired lady named Ruth came forward, enfolding Denise's hands in her warm grip. "We've got casseroles for your freezer," she said, "and a sign-up sheet for rides to the hospital. No arguing now, this is what neighbors do." For the first time since the nightmare began, Denise let her shoulders drop. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, sitting beside Elijah's hospital bed, Denise watched her son drift in and out of uneasy sleep. His small face was troubled even in rest. "Mom?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, baby." "Am I bad?" The question hung in the dim room like a weight. Denise's heart shattered. She gathered him close, careful of the IV lines. "Never," she said fiercely. "You are good and brave and so loved. What happened was not your fault, not one bit." She held him until his breathing evened out again, her tears falling silently into his dark curls. The fluorescent lights in the hospital family room cast harsh shadows across Daniel Carter's face as he sat across from Denise. Between them, a small table held 2 untouched cups of cold coffee. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, marking each moment they struggled to find words. Denise wrapped her arms around herself, her voice quiet but firm. "I need to know the truth, Daniel. All these years, the missed birthdays, the phone calls that cut off mid-sentence, the secrets." She met his eyes. "Will your position make this worse for Elijah? Or better?" Daniel ran a hand over his tired face. His usual composed demeanor cracked slightly, showing the weight of decisions made over years. "I thought keeping distance would keep you both safe. But I was wrong, Denise. The secrecy, it didn't just protect you. It became an excuse to stay away," she finished for him. "Yes," the word came out heavy with regret. "I'm sorry. Not because of what happened today, but because I should have been here all along. No explanations make that right." The admission hung in the air between them. Outside the family room, nurses wheeled carts past and phones rang at the station. But inside, time seemed to pause. "We need a plan," Denise said finally. "For tonight, for tomorrow." Daniel nodded. "One of us stays with him at all times. No gaps, no excuses." "I'll take first watch," Denise offered. "You look like you haven't slept in days." Before Daniel could respond, Tom Gallagher's solid frame filled the doorway. The retired Marine carried a manila folder and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to getting things done. "Got those forms you asked about," Tom said, placing the folder on the table. "And some notes on dealing with school administration. Learned a few things in my time." Daniel studied Tom with newfound understanding. The careful way the older man positioned himself in the room, how he assessed exits without seeming to look. These weren't skills learned as a school security guard. When Denise stepped out to use the restroom, Daniel turned to Tom. "You served." "A while back," Tom answered simply. "Different branch than what you're thinking, but same idea about watching out for people who need it." Daniel lowered his voice. "The school. They're already trying to bury this. Would you keep an eye on things?" Tom finished. "Already planned to. Not as any kind of operative, mind you, just an old-timer who believes in doing what's right." "Thank you," Daniel said, meaning it. The conversation paused as Denise returned. She looked exhausted but determined, ready to take her watch at Elijah's bedside. Just then, Daniel's secure phone buzzed in his pocket. The special vibration pattern meant urgent contact required, a morning briefing he couldn't miss. His hand moved automatically toward the device, but instead of checking the message, Daniel looked through the doorway toward Elijah's room. His son's small form was barely visible under the hospital blanket, chest rising and falling in sleep. The phone buzzed again. Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned away from the phone, from the pull of duty that had always won before. "I'll bring you some real coffee in a few hours," he told Denise softly. "And then I'll take over so you can rest." His phone fell silent as he walked with her to Elijah's room, choosing to stay present in this moment, with his family who needed him most. The fluorescent lights in Jefferson Ridge High's conference room cast harsh shadows across the long wooden table. Denise Carter's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the creases in her navy blazer, a folder of hospital paperwork clutched close to, her chest like armor. Behind her, Daniel Carter and Tom Gallagher sat with military straightbacks, their presence steady and grounding. Superintendent Walsh adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, we deeply regret what happened to young Elijah, but we must address the circumstances that led to this unfortunate incident." Denise's throat tightened at his careful choice of words. Unfortunate incident, like a spilled drink or a scraped knee. "The fact remains," Walsh continued, his voice taking on an oily smoothness, "that bringing a child into a workplace environment created an inherent risk situation." A rustle of agreement rippled through the audience. Denise caught snippets of whispered conversations, using his connections. CIA throwing their weight around, just looking for money. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. This was Denise's moment to speak. "My son," she said, voice clear despite her racing heart, "was pushed off a roof. He didn't fall. He didn't wander up there alone. He was terrorized and pushed." "Now, Mrs. Carter," a board member cut in, "those are very serious allegations without concrete." Tom Gallagher stood up, his weathered face calm but determined. "Ma'am, if I may speak." The board member blinked, thrown off by his quiet authority. "My name is Thomas Gallagher, United States Marine Corps, retired. I've worked security at Jefferson Ridge for 8 years. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. "That stairwell door was supposed to be locked during renovations. It wasn't. The security camera that should have captured the incident was reportedly down for maintenance, though no work order exists. And now we're sitting here, trying to blame a mother for the actions of students who treated a 6-year-old boy like he was worthless." A heavy silence fell over the room. Walsh shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We understand your concerns," he said finally, "but these matters require careful investigation. The board moves to review this incident internally, with any potential disciplinary actions to be addressed after winter break." 3 weeks? Denise's voice cracked. "You want to wait 3 weeks while my son has nightmares?" "All in favor?" Walsh called, ignoring her question. Hands rose around the table. "Motion carries." Outside the conference room, a crowd had gathered. A woman with perfectly styled hair thrust a microphone toward Denise's face. "Mrs. Carter, is it true your husband's CIA position is being used to pressure the school board? Are you threatening legal action?" "I just want justice for my son," Denise said quietly. "Sources say you deliberately created a security risk. How do you respond to allegations that—" Daniel stepped between Denise and the reporter, his presence a shield. Tom guided them through the parking lot to his truck, but the damage was done. Back home, Denise's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. She opened one message and felt sick. "Your kind always playing victim. Should have watched your kid better." Another, "CIA thinking they own this town. Disgraceful." And another, "Maybe teach your boy to mind his own business." She dropped the phone on the kitchen counter, hands shaking. What had been a private nightmare was now splashed across social media and local news. The battle for her son's justice had become a public spectacle, with sides being drawn and lies being spread. Tom's earlier words echoed in her mind. A 6-year-old boy treated like he was worthless. Now it seemed the whole town was determined to prove him right. Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "Truth matters more than their noise." But as her phone lit up with another stream of hateful messages, Denise wondered if truth would be enough against a town determined not to hear it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jefferson Ridge High School's parking lot as Denise walked toward her car. Her steps slowed when she noticed something wasn't right. Someone had scratched crude words into her blue Honda's paint. "Keep quiet or else." The driver's side window was smeared with thick mud, making it impossible to see through. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone. Before she could dial, Tom's pickup truck rumbled up beside her. "Don't touch anything," he said, climbing out. "We're documenting every bit of this." Tom took photos while Denise called the police. Daniel arrived minutes later, his tie loosened and his face tight with concern. "You're staying at Tom's tonight," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. He's got a guest room and good neighbors who actually watch the street. "I can handle myself," Denise protested weakly. "This isn't about handling yourself," Tom said. "It's about being smart. My porch light works. and Mrs. Peterson next door hasn't missed a suspicious car in 30 years. At the hospital, Elijah was being moved from the ICU to a step-down unit. The nurses called it progress, but Denise's heart ached watching her son jump at every sound. Every time footsteps passed in the hallway, he pulled his blanket higher until only his eyes showed. "Can I cover my ears?" he whispered. Just for sleeping." "Of course, baby." Denise tucked the blanket around him like a cocoon. "Whatever helps you feel safe." Daniel sat in the corner, typing notes on his laptop. He'd loosened his tie hours ago but kept his jacket on like armor. "I'm organizing everything chronologically," he said. "Names, times, every detail we can remember. The detective needs facts, not emotions." Denise nodded, watching him work. It felt strange seeing him so focused on their family instead of national security. Strange, but right. "I filed the formal complaint," she said. "Asked the DA to review it, personally." "Good." Daniel looked up. "Tom's checking the school again tonight. That roof access should have been secured days ago." After dinner from the hospital cafeteria, Tom texted photos showing the stairwell still unlocked, the roof door still easy to push open. No warning signs, no cameras, no changes at all. "They're hoping it'll just go away," Denise said bitterly. Daniel squeezed her hand. "We won't let it." Around 9 o'clock, Denise's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her finger hovered over delete, expecting more harassment. Instead, the words made her breath catch. "I saw it. I have proof. Please don't tell Brock." She showed the screen to Daniel and Tom. They huddled around the dim hospital room light, reading and rereading those 11 words. "One of them broke ranks," Tom said quietly. "They're scared," Daniel added. "Not just of Brock, of what telling the truth might cost them." Denise stared at the message, thinking of another child who needed help. "Whoever this is," she whispered, "they could be in danger too." The three adults exchanged glances in the quiet hospital room, while Elijah slept with his blanket pulled tight over his ears, and somewhere in the darkness, a young witness carried the weight of an awful truth. Note: the scene ends here as specified in the instructions, focusing on the anonymous message and its implications for both families, without adding foreshadowing or deviating from the prompt. The Friday morning sun hadn't quite burned through the fog when Tom Gallagher pulled into Eddie's Diner, just off Route 123. The neon open sign buzzed quietly, and only 2 other cars dotted the cracked parking lot, perfect for a meeting that needed privacy. Inside, the smell of coffee and toast filled the air. Tom spotted the boy immediately, hunched in the corner booth wearing a grey hoodie pulled low over his face. Mason Price's hands were wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate, but the whipped cream hadn't been touched. It sat melting into a sad puddle. Tom slid into the opposite bench. "Mason?" The boy flinched but didn't look up. I didn't know if you'd really come. You did the right thing texting me." Tom kept his voice gentle. He'd seen that look before, on young recruits who'd witnessed their first real combat. "Take your time." A waitress approached, but Tom waved her off with a kind smile. The diner's radio played old country songs, just loud enough to mask their conversation. "I followed Brock," Mason finally whispered. "I always follow Brock. Everyone follows Brock." His fingers tightened around the mug. "But this time, I knew it was wrong. I saw that little kid's face when we found him drawing. He was just sitting there, being little." Tom waited, letting Mason find his words. "Brock said it would be funny, just scare him a little. But then we were on the roof, and the wind was so cold. And that kid, Elijah, he started crying." Mason's voice cracked. "I should have stopped it. I should have grabbed him or yelled or something, but I just stood there. And then—" Mason pulled out his phone with trembling hands. "I saved it before Brock's dad made us delete everything. I put it in a private cloud thing." The video was short, but devastating in its clarity. The high roof angle showed Elijah's small figure backed against the edge. Brock's push was deliberate. The kick that followed was cruel. There was no mistaking this for an accident. "I can't sleep," Mason said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him falling. My mum keeps asking what's wrong, but I can't tell her. I can't tell anyone except I'm telling you." Tom studied the teenager across from him. No lecture would weigh heavier than the guilt Mason already carried. "Saving this was the first brave thing you've done all week," Tom said quietly. But real courage means facing what comes next. The truth needs to go to the detective and the DA, with your statement. Mason's head snapped up, fear clear in his eyes. Brock's power ends the moment you stop giving it to him. Tom leaned forward. You're not alone in this, but you have to choose, right now, what kind of person you want to be. Across town at the hospital, sunlight streamed through Elijah's window. The boy sat propped against pillows, his beloved sketchbook open on his lap. For days, he'd only drawn dark rectangles that looked like rooftops. But this morning, something changed. Daniel watched from his chair as Elijah's crayon moved carefully across the page. Slowly, deliberately, a simple airplane took shape. Not a masterpiece, just a child's basic drawing of wings and a tail. But it was the first plane Elijah had drawn since the fall. "Daddy?" Elijah's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, buddy? Can planes—" He traced the crayon line again. "Can they fly away from bad roofs?" Daniel moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "They can fly anywhere you want them to, son, towards safe skies and good places." Elijah nodded, adding a tiny window to his plane. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Tom's truck pulled into the police station parking lot. Mason sat rigid in the passenger seat, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "I can't," he breathed as Tom opened his door. "They'll hate me. Everyone will hate me." "The truth is harder than hiding," Tom said, "but it's the only way forward." Mason's feet seemed rooted to the pavement. His whole body trembled as they approached the station doors. Just before he could turn and bolt, Tom placed a steady hand on his shoulder. The touch was gentle but grounding, like an anchor in a storm. Together they stepped forward into the fluorescent-lit lobby, where truth waited to be told. The last rays of Friday's sun painted the hospital courtyard in soft amber. Cues as people gathered, holding white candles in paper cups. The flame glow flickered across faces both familiar and new. Church ladies with well-worn Bibles, veterans wearing caps that spoke of years of service, nurses pausing between shifts, and families holding their own children closer. Tom Gallagher stood near the edge, his weathered face solemn as the first notes of "Amazing Grace" rose into the cooling air. Next to him, 3 other veterans, men who'd never met Elijah but understood what it meant to stand up for something, kept silent watch. Denise Carter wrapped her arms around herself, overwhelmed by the circle of light growing in the gathering dusk. Mrs. Peterson from the church choir squeezed her hand and pressed a cup of hot cocoa into her fingers. "We're here, honey. We're all here." When the song ended, people looked to Denise expectantly. She cleared her throat, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming, please. Just keep praying for Elijah, for truth to win." Her simple words carried more weight than any lengthy speech. Inside Elijah's room, Daniel sat in the chair that had become his post, holding a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. He read slowly, watching his son's face for any sign of distress. When Elijah's eyes fluttered at the wild rumpus part, Daniel paused, letting his voice drop softer. "Dad?" Elijah's question was barely a breath. "Right here, buddy." Daniel set the book down. "Need a break?" Elijah nodded, pulling his blanket higher. Daniel adjusted it carefully, making sure it didn't catch on any wires. These small gestures felt new to his hands, more delicate than any operation he'd ever run. Detective Sarah Martinez appeared in the doorway, gesturing for Denise. In the hallway, she spoke in low, measured tones. "We received the video evidence from Mason Price this afternoon. Clear footage matches his statement exactly. I'm taking it to the DA first thing tomorrow morning." Denise pressed a hand to her mouth, tears threatening. For days, she'd carried fear like a stone in her chest. Now finally she could breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for believing us." The detective's kind eyes hardened slightly. "This isn't about belief anymore, Mrs. Carter. This is about proof." Back in Elijah's room, Daniel was humming softly, something he'd never done before, when Denise's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Jefferson Ridge Legal Counsel. She answered on speaker, Daniel moving closer to listen. A smooth voice oozed through the phone. "Mrs. Carter, we'd like to propose a private resolution to this unfortunate situation." Denise's hand tightened around the phone. "Go on." "The school board is prepared to offer a generous settlement package, full coverage of medical expenses, plus additional compensation for emotional distress. We'll ensure the boys receive appropriate counseling and what else?" Denise's voice was quiet but sharp. A pause. A standard non-disclosure agreement. For everyone's protection, of course. Daniel watched Denise's face, ready to step in, but staying silent. This was her fight. You want me to take money to be quiet? Denise's voice trembled but held firm. While those boys get counseling and everything gets swept away? Mrs. Carter, please understand. No. The word rang clear and final. No amount of money will buy my silence. My son deserves justice, not hush money. Consider carefully. We're done here. Denise ended the call, hands shaking. Daniel touched her shoulder. You did right. Before Denise could respond, loud laughter echoed down the hallway, familiar, entitled laughter. Through the doorway she glimpsed Brock's parents striding past, heads high, the principal between them like an old friend. The sound cut through the peace of the vigil's afterglow, sharp as a knife. Denise watched them pass, their confidence a clear message. They weren't finished. Not by far. A machine beeped softly in Elijah's room. Outside, the last candles were being gathered up, their brief light fading into memory. But something stronger had been kindled. Truth, finally breaking through the dark. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with its usual Saturday morning quiet. A few nurses grabbed coffee between shifts, and the smell of reheated breakfast sandwiches lingered in the air. Denise Carter wrapped her hands around a paper cup of tea she hadn't touched, while Daniel sat beside her, his suit jacket draped over the back of his chair. The district attorney's investigator, Ms. Reynolds, spread manila folders across the scratched Formica table. Her silver-rimmed glasses caught the fluorescent light as she pulled out a printed timeline and slid it toward them. The video changes everything, she said, tapping a red-inked note. Mason Price's testimony, combined with this footage, gives us what we need. Denise leaned forward, scanning the neat rows of dates and times. Her throat tightened at the clinical description. Subject EC pushed from roof elevation. We're drafting formal charges, Ms. Reynolds continued, primarily against Brock Whitman, but also including Kayla Harlan and Jake Matthews as accessories. The word charges made Denise's hands shake. These were kids, mean, cruel kids, but still kids. She felt Daniel's steady presence beside her, neither pushing nor pulling back. What about Mason? Denise asked. He's cooperating fully. We're offering a different path, mandatory counseling, community service, and he'll need to testify about what happened. But he came forward on his own. That matters. Relief washed through Denise. Not joy exactly, but the deep exhale of truth finally standing up straight. Upstairs they found Tom Gallagher in Elijah's room, his weathered face beaming as their son took careful steps between parallel bars. The physical therapist kept a gentle hand near Elijah's back, but didn't hover. That's it, champion, Tom called out. Show him how it's done. Elijah's face scrunched in concentration, his hospital gown swimming around his small frame. Each step was tiny but determined. Look, Mom, he whispered. I'm walking tall. Denise blinked back tears. Daniel moved closer, and for once his CIA-trained composure cracked into a real smile. Through the morning, a steady stream of support trickled in. Mrs. Chen from next door dropped off homemade soup. The church ladies arranged a meal calendar. Even strangers seemed kinder. A nurse pulled Denise aside during vitals checks. You're doing the right thing, she said softly, standing up for him. We see too many families pressured to stay quiet. Around 2 o'clock, phones across the ward buzzed with news alerts. Denise's heart sank as she read the headline on a local blog. CIA officer's son at center of school incident, pressure tactics alleged. The article twisted everything, painting Daniel as a shadowy figure using government influence to target local families. It mentioned classified operations, hinted at cover-ups, and completely ignored Elijah's injuries. Hospital security appeared more frequently in the halls. A photographer tried to slip past the nurse's station before being escorted out. Denise watched Elijah sleeping, his favorite stuffed plane tucked under one arm, and fought back angry tears. He was just a little boy who liked to draw pictures. Now strangers were turning him into a story, a symbol, a scandal. Daniel's phone vibrated. He stepped into the hallway, but Denise could see his shoulders tense as he listened. When he returned, his face had lost all color. Security office, he said quietly. They're concerned about exposure. We need to be careful about... He stopped. looking at Denise with naked fear she'd never seen before. Not fear of threats or danger, Daniel had trained for those, but fear of losing them. Fear that his job would tear apart the family he was just learning to hold properly. Denise reached for his hand across Elijah's bed. For a moment, they were both silent, watching their son's peaceful breathing, knowing tomorrow would bring new battles. But right now in this room, they were simply parents guarding their child's rest. Tom appeared in the doorway with 2 fresh cups of coffee and his steady presence. Some battles needed weapons, but others just needed people willing to stand their ground and tell the truth. They had chosen their path. Now they had to walk it, step by careful step, just like Elijah between those parallel bars. Not looking down, not looking back, just moving forward. The courthouse steps felt like mountains under Denise's feet as she climbed them Sunday afternoon. Her church dress, the navy one she saved for special occasions, felt too tight around her neck. Tom walked beside her, his presence steady as always. Inside, the marble halls echoed with whispers and the click of camera phones. Brock Whitman's family filled 3 whole rows, all pressed suits and pearl necklaces. His father sat in the middle like a king, whispering to their expensive lawyer. "Just breathe," Tom murmured. "One step at a time." Daniel met them at the courtroom doors, his tie perfect, but his eyes tired. He squeezed Denise's hand before they went in. The preliminary hearing started with paperwork and procedure. Denise watched the judge flip through pages, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. But something felt wrong. The air was too thick, like before a storm. Then Brock's lawyer stood up, all smooth confidence and practiced concern. "Your Honor, we have serious concerns about witness intimidation. Mr. Carter's position with the CIA creates an environment of fear. How can we ensure honest testimony when people are afraid of government repercussions?" The judge frowned. "An interesting point. Detective Richards, what about the video evidence?" The detective shifted in his seat. "There's been a technical issue, Your Honor. The primary copy in our system is currently unavailable, listed as a data error." Denise's stomach dropped. The room tilted sideways for a moment, and she grabbed the wooden bench to stay upright. She felt Tom's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "Given these complications," the judge said, "and my current caseload, I'm ordering a delay. We need additional verification of the remaining evidence copies and time to address these security concerns." Outside, the courthouse steps had become a circus. People held signs about CIA interference and cover-ups. A woman with wild eyes pointed at Denise. "Using your son as a pawn! Shame on you!" Daniel tried to shield them, creating a path through the crowd with his body. But then his phone buzzed, that special vibration he used for work emergencies. His face went pale as he read the message. They hurried to Tom's truck in the parking lot. Daniel's hands were shaking slightly as he explained, "It's an urgent assignment, time-sensitive. My supervisor says—" He swallowed hard. "The publicity is becoming a security concern. I have to report before dawn." "You're leaving?" Denise's voice cracked. "Now? I'll be back for the rescheduled hearing, I swear it." Daniel's eyes were full of pain. "I'm so sorry, Denise. I don't have a choice." The drive to Tom's house was silent. Denise stared out the window at the passing streetlights, holding herself together by threads. But once they parked in Tom's driveway, those threads started to snap. The first sob caught her by surprise, raw and ragged in her throat. Then another came and another, until she was crying like she hadn't allowed herself to cry all week. Crying for Elijah's fear, for the missing evidence, for Daniel leaving again when she needed him most. Tom didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, engine off, letting her cry. When the sobs finally quieted to hiccups, he spoke in his gentle marine voice. "We're not done." Denise wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, mascara staining her fingers black. She knew Tom was right, but right now, done or not, she was empty. Just empty. The kitchen in Tom's modest home glowed with pre-dawn light as Denise clutched Daniel's, reading the 3 short lines over and over. His familiar handwriting seemed to waver on the page. "I love you both. I'm working to protect you. I'll be back as soon as I can." On the worn leather couch, Elijah slept fitfully, his Batman pajamas twisted around his small frame. His sketchbook lay open on his chest, rising and falling with each breath. The latest drawing showed a dark rectangle, another rooftop, but this time with a tiny stick, figure walking away from it. Tom shuffled into the kitchen, already dressed in his security guard uniform. "Coffee's ready," he said quietly, pouring 2 mugs. "Sarah from church will be here at 7:30 to stay with Elijah. DA's office opens at 8. Denise folded the note carefully, tucking it into her pocket. "I keep thinking about that missing file. How does evidence just disappear?" "It doesn't," Tom said firmly. "Not without help." The drive to the district attorney's office felt endless. Early morning traffic crawled past gleaming office buildings, their windows reflecting the pale winter sun. Tom guided his pickup through the streets with steady hands, while Denise rehearsed what she would say. Assistant District Attorney Helen Martinez met them in the lobby, her expression grim but determined. In her office, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "The file deletion wasn't random," she said, spreading documents across her desk. "We're treating it as potential tampering, but we need more than suspicion to move forward." Denise gripped the edge of her chair. "So they win? They just make it go away?" "No," Helen said firmly. "We don't quit. We build the case again, piece by—" A knock interrupted her. Her assistant poked her head in. "Miss Martinez, Mason Price is here with his mother. They don't have an appointment, but—" The boy who entered looked nothing like the frightened teenager from the hospital hallway. Mason's face was pale, but his jaw was set. His mother, a thin woman in nurse's scrubs, kept one hand on his shoulder. "I won't hide anymore," Mason said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was there. I helped hurt Elijah, and I have proof." Tom moved to stand beside Mason, the way a lighthouse holds steady for storm-tossed boats. Mason pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "This is a second backup of the video. I saved it to multiple places because I knew they might try to make it disappear." His hands trembled. "I'll make a sworn statement. I know I'll be in trouble too, but I can't sleep knowing what we did." Helen took the flash drive carefully like it was made of glass. She nodded to her assistant. "Get Judge Warren on the phone. We need an emergency hearing." She turned to Mason. "This is brave, son. It won't erase what happened, but it matters." The next hours blurred together. Helen's office buzzed with activity as she drafted emergency motions and preservation orders. 2 investigators arrived to take Mason's statement, while his mother held his hand. Tom made quiet phone calls to veteran friends who could help watch the house. At 6 that evening, Denise's phone lit up with Daniel's number. "I'm coming back," he said without preamble, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I told them this can't wait. I'll drive all night if I have to." Mason came forward, Denise said. Really came forward. "We have a backup of the video." A long breath crackled through the line. "Thank God. Are you okay? Is Elijah—" "He's drawing again, small things. Tom's daughter brought him new colored pencils. I'm so sorry I had to leave. When this is done, we need to talk about everything. About being a real family again." Tears pressed against Denise's eyes, but her voice stayed steady. She looked over at Elijah, who was carefully coloring a sky blue with his new pencils. "Baby," she said softly, hanging up the phone. "We're going to tell the truth, and we're going to be okay." Elijah looked up at her, his small face serious. He didn't smile, but he reached for her hand, and that was enough for now. The morning sun cast long shadows through the courthouse windows as Denise held Elijah's small hand. His palm was sweaty, but he didn't let go. Tom Gallagher walked beside them, his weathered face set with quiet determination. Daniel had arrived just before dawn, still in his travel clothes, and now stood close to his family, protective without being imposing. Inside the courtroom, the polished wooden benches creaked as people settled. Mason Price sat with his mother in the front row, hands clasped tightly in his lap. The judge, a stern-faced woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, studied the newly submitted evidence with careful attention. When the video played, the only sound was the soft whir of the court reporter's machine. On the screen, Elijah's small figure backed away from larger shadows. The pushing, the kick, the fall. There was no mistaking what happened. Several people gasped. Someone started to cry. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said, "would you like to address the court?" Denise stood slowly. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium. "My son used to love drawing airplanes," she began. "Now he draws rooftops and dark squares. He wakes up screaming. Yesterday we passed a stairwell at the grocery store, and he grabbed my leg so hard it left marks." She took a deep breath. People whispered that I was wrong to bring him to work, that I should have known better, that I'm causing trouble by wanting justice. But I ask you, what mother wouldn't fight for her child? The silence in the courtroom grew heavier. Tom's testimony came next, his military bearing evident as he described finding the unlocked roof access, documenting the school's delayed responses, and watching security footage mysteriously disappear from the system. Mason stood when called, his voice barely above a whisper at first. "I was there," he said. "I followed Brock because I was scared not to. I watched them push Elijah. I didn't stop it." He swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to tell the truth." The judge removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Based on the evidence presented, I am ordering immediate protective measures." She listed them clearly. Restraining orders, mandatory counseling, strict supervision requirements. The school district will cooperate fully with investigators or face additional consequences. Outside the courtroom, Brock's parents approached the DA, their expensive clothes somehow making them look smaller now. "These are children," Brock's father insisted. "They deserve mercy." The DA, a woman with steel-grey hair, didn't blink. "Mercy without accountability isn't mercy at all," she replied. "It's just denial wearing better clothes." Daniel stood very still as Brock walked past, escorted by his attorney. For the first time, he looked directly at the teenager who had hurt his son. "You will face what you did," he said quietly. The words carried more weight than any threat could have. In the supervised hallway afterward, Elijah suddenly stopped walking. Through the glass doors, he could see the teens being led to their cars. His fingers dug into Denise's palm. Fear flickered across his face, but then something else appeared too, something stronger. He took a deep breath, just like his therapist had taught him. Then, holding tight to his mother's hand, Elijah took one step forward. It wasn't a big step, but it was brave, and it was his choice. That single step echoed more powerfully than all the morning's legal victories. It said, "I choose to live. I choose to move. I choose not to let fear win." Denise felt tears prick her eyes, but she just squeezed his hand back and matched his pace. One step at a time, together. The late October sun streamed through Jefferson Ridge High School's freshly cleaned windows as Denise Carter walked down the main hallway. Her shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step measured and purposeful. Beside her, a woman in a crisp blazer, the district's new compliance officer, made notes on an iPad while Tom Gallagher followed a few steps behind, his presence as steady as always. Daniel Carter had joined them too, looking slightly out of place in casual clothes instead of his usual suit. He'd taken approved leave from the agency, choosing family over protocol for perhaps the first time in years. "We've reinforced all security protocols," the compliance officer explained, gesturing to new camera installations. "Every access point is now monitored and recorded." Denise nodded, her throat tight as they passed the stairwell where everything had changed. The door that had once stood carelessly open was now fitted with an alarm system and heavy locks. "The memorial garden will be completed by spring," the officer continued, leading them toward a set of windows overlooking the construction area. "The community donations exceeded expectations, and the district's restitution fund is covering the rest." Tom cleared his throat. "Good to see action instead of excuses," he said quietly. A gentle tap on Denise's shoulder made her turn. The school counselor stood there with Elijah, who wore noise-canceling headphones and clutched a small metal airplane in his right hand. His therapist walked beside him, maintaining careful distance while staying close enough to help if needed. "Hi, baby," Denise whispered, resisting the urge to scoop him up. They'd practiced this visit for days. Short exposure, clear exits, complete control. Elijah's eyes darted around, but he didn't look up toward the ceiling. His grip on the toy plane tightened as they walked past the old stairwell, but he kept moving, one foot in front of the other. They reached the outdoor courtyard where construction barriers surrounded the future garden space. A single bench had already been installed, its polished surface catching the sunlight. Denise ran her fingers over the engraved words. "Every child belongs." "Can I sit?" Elijah asked softly, his voice muffled behind the headphones. "Of course, buddy," Daniel answered, helping him onto the bench. Father and son sat together, Elijah's small hand still wrapped around his plane, while Daniel's arm hovered protectively behind him. Later that afternoon, The gymnasium, filled with students and staff for a special assembly. Tom stood uncomfortably on stage as the principal praised his actions, his weathered face flushing at the attention. "Mr. Gallagher exemplifies the courage and integrity we must all strive for," the principal announced. His quick response saved a life, but his continued advocacy helped save our school's soul. Several parents approached Denise during the reception, their eyes wet with genuine remorse. One mother clasped her hands, whispering, "We should have spoken up sooner. I'm so sorry." As the crowd thinned, Daniel pulled Denise aside near the gym's trophy case. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice low but certain. "I've requested reassignment to a domestic advisory role." Denise's eyes widened. "Daniel, your position is just a job," he finished. "Our son needs his father. You need your partner. I won't miss another moment that matters." The autumn day softened into evening as they drove to Riverside Park. Elijah had been asking to fly his plane there, away from tall buildings and hard edges. The park spread out before them, all rolling grass and scattered trees painted in sunset colors. Elijah stepped onto the lawn, lifted his plane, and began to run. Daniel jogged beside him, matching his pace while staying just far enough away to let him lead. Denise settled onto a park bench, wrapping her cardigan tight against the cooling air. She watched her son's face break into a real smile, small but genuine, as he made his plane soar. Daniel's longer strides shortened to match Elijah's rhythm, their shadows stretching together across the grass. The toy plane lifted higher, catching the orange light like a promise. Elijah's laughter, still careful but true, floated back to where Denise sat. Maud's sound wrapped around her heart like a bandage, beginning to heal what fear had broken. "Look, Mom," Elijah called out, his plane banking through the sunset. "It's flying." Denise pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the steady beat there. They were still tender, still learning to trust the ground beneath their feet. But here in the fading light, with her son's plane cutting through golden air and her husband finally, fully present, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel in weeks. They were safe. They were home. The plane curved up into the glowing sky, carrying their shadows into a gentler night.